The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow. A show for all who are on the journey to discover the truths about their identity, history, culture, politics, spirituality, and family relationships. This is a show for the Black Freedom Movement and the Black Power generation and the hip-hop generation, including Black Lives Matter and associate activists, all of whom are seeking change. Dr. Oba Tashaka and his guests are dropping knowledge and insight from his successful organizing, research, writings, and innovative thoughts, the best of which have piped into God's mind to lift you up higher and higher. To the bosses, OGs, rappers, influencers, and those looking to evolve from the constraints of misinformation and miseducation to build a foundation for personal growth, love, and mental freedom. Check out the wisdom of the OR. Yeah, that's the original revolutionary, Oba T, who inspired 1 million black men with his rousing speech at the Million Man March, and who continues to fight, write, and speak the truth. Dr. Oba Tashaka is one of the deepest deep thinkers in the world today. A quote by Dr. Asa Hilliard. Dr. Oba Tashaka, then Bill Bradley, was the best leader organizer in the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE. An endorsement from Dr. George Wiley, Associate Director of National CORE and the best organizer blacks produced in the 1970s as the organizer of the National Welfare Rights Organization. The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow.
Once again, greetings to the viewers. And it's always interesting to see who clicks in first. It's usually the same people, but then sometimes someone beats you to the punch. But this time it was Brother Ogawa. Greetings. Sister Robin, one of our real dedicated viewers and conscious persons. M. Jewel, Gloria Briscoe, Worley Smith, and Lao Tzu. He has a statement here, beautiful ebony people. In the year 531 of the Ma'afa, I just finished listening to Dr. Richard Wolff on the subject of capitalism turns authoritative. Richard Wolff is a scholar, a Marxist who specializes in economics. And he comes on KPFA radio, and then he probably has his own show. Well, Dan Freeman, Lawrence. Hey, Lawrence, glad to have you on. How's it over there in Asia? And Ed Donaldson. So greetings to everybody, and just want to remind people to hit the like button. Sister Lisa, thanks for the greetings to my family. My wife right now is in Barbados, enjoying herself, and send out my love to her. And Lisa is a former student at San Francisco State Black Studies Department. Glad to have you, sister. Right on. As I always do, or have been since I've been appraised to do it, hit the like button. If you like the show, hit the like button. And if you're new to the show, subscribe and do it right away. All you have to do is hit the red button and you're subscribed. Okay? Now, as I've explained before, but I'm going to explain it in a different way, picking the topics for these shows is like a jazz musician deciding what kind of music they're going to play, because this is an art form that I'm presenting here, and on multiple levels. And so what I'm doing is presenting beauty, and but it's got to come from your soul. So sometimes in picking a topic, it takes a little while because it's got to come from the soul. That's the way it was for this week's topic. Sometimes I'll have two of them laid out and stuff, but generally that's the case. And if you're going to really do anything, and public speakers learn this, and this is beyond public speaking, but to speak on what you believe in and what you know, and then that usually comes with something that people can relate to. So I don't carry a cell phone around. I was in the gym yesterday and I look at all these people who are holding up time on a machine because they're spending more time looking at the internet than they are at working out. And working out's a good time for endorphins to kick in. That's where real creativity occurs. So I thought through, at least I thought I did, some of the things for this show yesterday. Hitting iron, 140 pounds, whatever the weight. You know, you feel good like a black man should or a black woman should, you know. So these shows come from feeling, and then of course they're based on knowledge, but it's coming from the soul. And so it's like jazz, but especially it's drawing from, and I'll never be able to approximate what they do, the spiritual blues. And that's one of my specialties is music, African-American music, all genres, you know. So that's what this show is, to present beauty. So it's an art form. This is an art form. And basically, Africans in general are artists. LaShonda Henderson, welcome to you. We're artists. And the African American is special in that respect. And I'll deal with at least one dimension of that today. So the larger part of this show is on presenting insights and stuff for you, for anyone that watches, but especially for the young folks, especially for the young folks, because the young folks are the future. As I've often said, I'm not interested in just speaking to the choir. And even though I may have some stuff that they haven't heard before, still, the ones that really need to hear it most are the future. But people in my age group, a little younger, you're important too, because you've got wisdom, insight, a life of experience that you can share. J.H. Said Barbara Wright enjoyed seeing you on his 100th. Last Saturday in Oakland at McClymonds High School, we honored the 100th birthday of Mr. Oscar Wright. Mr. Oscar Wright is a Black freedom fighter from Mississippi. And he and I teamed up together in the 80s, and along with the sister from the Nation of Islam, we co-chaired a chapter of the Black United Front called the Black United Front for Educational Reform. And it was one of my real pleasures in life to organize with Mr. Oscar Wright, who turned 100 last Saturday, born in 1923. And he came out of the hellish of hellholes in the United States, one of the hellish of hellholes in the world, Mississippi, where you have the most beautiful Black people and the most hellish white people you can conceive of. And I know some people don't like hearing this, but that's a fact. It has not changed. It's Black people who have produced any kind of change in Mississippi. And Mr. Oscar Wright has dedicated his life to the education of Black children and fighting for their education. And took over McClymonds High School, where his birthday was being acknowledged with the help of the principal of McClymonds, Dr. Agee, who was catching hell from the Board of Education. And we came up with a strategy to, for 5 years, construct an African-centered curriculum for McClymonds. That strategy then, because my main reason for doing this was to push the National Black United Front to take the African-centered curriculum, World Curriculum Project, as a national project. And what we succeeded in doing in Oakland with Mr. Oscar Wright's help was to get the national organization to take this up as a national movement, and it spread across the country. I led it. And it was the best project that the National Black United Front has organized. I'm a co-organizer of the National Black United Front, along with Reverend Herbert Dowerty, Brother G2 Weusi, and Ron Herndon. G2 Weusi was a field marshal in that, though I had been prodding him to pushing him to build the Black United Front. And so he was the spearhead, and I became national vice chair of this. So Mr. Oscar Wright, it was a pure pleasure to be at his birthday party, 100 years old. And then he got up and gave an hour-and-a-half speech on the state of Black education in America. And J.H., who said that Mr. Wright enjoyed my presentation, that's John Halcomb. John Halcomb X is a former student of mine. He was a member of Buffer, and he has his own trucking company, which he calls Imhotep Trucking. Nice brother. And he's been real close to Mr. Oscar Wright. So I want to say again, happy birthday to him. And John Halcomb put up a snippet of the speech that I gave on my Facebook page for Mr. Oscar Wright. So if you go to Over to Shaka, the Facebook page that has nearly 5,000 friends, you'll see that. Watch that. Happy birthday again, Mr. Wright. By the way, Mr. Wright's also a multi-millionaire, and hardly nobody knows it. He lives in the heart of Oakland, dresses like everybody else. But he's also a businessman, you know. So this show is like an art form. I'm trying to present beauty and truth and wisdom that will help you to empower you to draw on your own inner powers. That's my motive. I don't have any other, you know. What am I going to get out of this? I'm getting a lot out of this, by the way, which is the prep work that I do for this show that requires me to dig. And I've got some books that's going to come out of these shows. Books. You hear me? They are already there, and there will be more coming up. So a good part of this show has been presenting various views coming from me, but also to present other masters who present their beauty. And we had the privilege of, one, understanding the contribution of the greatest leader in the 20th century, Amilcar Cabral, and that presentation was done a couple of weeks ago. And then we had the privilege of interviewing Mrs. Ana Maria Cabral, Amilcar Cabral's wife. And we didn't interview her just because she was Amilcar Cabral's wife, but because she's a great leader in her own right and made a great contribution to the liberation of Guinea-Bissau through their armed struggle, but also to the country itself, serving as a diplomat, an educator, and in other roles. So there were deep insights coming from that. And you see in the background here, the guy with the sunglasses on, that's Amilcar Cabral. And right now, I'm finishing reviewing my research work on Amilcar Cabral to finish the section on Boloso in the book Seba, To Know the Truth is to Be the Truth, a book that is the replacement system for teaching or pedagogy. So he is the fifth of the six masters I look at on, in general, how they became masters. And in this case, the chapter that I'm working on now is how he became a boloso or improvisational master. Now, he's a Sodaya master, an innovator in many areas, but I'm finishing that. And then of the six masters, I'm one of them, because you can't explain this unless you have gone through this yourself. And the next one will be me. And then I'll be going through five masters in the Sodaya or innovative system, five. We have six in the book, but five of them are innovators. So that'll be my next work. When I'm finished with that, then how this system works on the ground, which this whole book is about, but I'll be giving concrete examples of how this works in the classroom, independent Black schools and public schools, in liberation movements, which no book on pedagogy deals with, in prisons, in spiritual institutions, in the family, in general at large. So this is the one I'm finishing. So we've had other masters as well on this show. So the next two shows are going to be part one and part two of the theme I'm discussing today. And then the show following that is going to be an interview with Brother Davy D, who is the head of a show called Hard Knock Radio that comes on KPFA Radio, which is a listener-sponsored radio, not corporate-sponsored. And Davy D is a master of hip-hop, and the topic will be the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. And that will be the week following this Saturday. So check that one out. And Davy D is a master in his own right, and he is a person who has a real good knowledge of current events and politics and stuff like that. So that's a topic that we'll be discussing 2 weeks from now. Now, the topic for today's show provides an introduction into the essential nature of God, the essential nature of God, the key quality of all of God's quality, and there are many, that represents the most central quality of God. And this quality resides in you. Of course, not at the same level, but it resides in you. Of all God's creations, other than God, you're the only one of God's creations that possesses this central power. And so that's what part one of this series is dealing with. What is that central power of God that is key to all other God powers? Michelle Mayberry, thank you. Appreciate you too, all of you, and you too. As M. Jewell said, be sure to share, and for people who are new, be sure to subscribe. So this first of the two-part series is going to get down to, of all God's powers, which one is most central? We're going to focus just on this one central power, and of course, only in part, because it's so vast, and none of us know all of it anyway. But in doing that, we're also looking at ourselves. And so this is the key point. What is the essence of God? Because it's the same as asking, what is the essence of you and me? And this is no small question, you know. Next week, I'm going to explore my contributions in this area of the 6 innovative systems that I've shaped that will help you tap into your unique God powers, particularly the one that is most unique. Greetings to Basic Plateau Production Company. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Hit the subscriber button right now. If you haven't, we're glad to have you on. It's a nice picture of you, too. So next week, I'll be looking at the 6 innovative systems that I've established that will help you tap into your God power. Now, I want to stress there are many ways to tap into God power. I'm not suggesting mine is the only way. There are many ways, and many of you are tapping into them. And there are probably more ways that we can all use to even draw more deeply into our inner powers, and we're always discovering them. So next week I'll be going into how these 6 innovative systems that I've developed over the course of a lifetime, how they tie in to freeing you to express the God powers within you. But I'm not suggesting this is the only way. You know, this is my experience, but this is also suited, the 6 innovative powers, many of them are suited to unlocking powers for people who have been under a special duress and strain and stress under systems that are designed to shut your powers out or to get you to not believe that you have these powers. And I really want to say that a special dedication for this show is for all the brave ancestors of African people who decided to come during the time of the Ma'afa, or the enslavement in the US and the Western Hemisphere, or the colonialism in Africa. Those brave souls who chose to come during that time, they're among the bravest of all. And I want to say this, that they came with higher powers than many of us possess now, because they were more African than we are now, contrary to our view of them. They were truly brave souls, because no one on this earth is here without purpose. We just don't remember what that purpose is in some cases, and in other cases, we're discovering or have discovered that purpose. To U Akata, welcome to you. I like that name. Heavy. So this is also dedicated to those brave souls that created the foundation that we stand on, who are the strongest of Africans among us, because they were closest to Africa. And they underwent the fire and flame of enslavement, and they came out strong, not contrary to the view you have of them as a broken people. They came out with their humanity intact, and they were the closest among us to God. You hear me? And they brought in their great spirit people, men and women, who are the great diviners who kept us going. Most of them were not Christians during this time. Why would they be when they brought something far more powerful? And as I pointed out in previous shows, when after emancipation, 97% of Black people in this country chose to house what they call our spirit system under Christianity, they were housing it under what sustained us during enslavement, which was voodoo, which simply means God, the force of God. And so the topic for today is holistic and organic systems for being a co-creator with God. You don't need the systems I'm giving you necessarily to be a co-creator. You were born one. but you're under systems that are designed and set up to cloud your powers. And this isn't just true for Black people. This is true for all people, but especially Black folks who have come under some real controlling forces and devastating forces. But this is a system out to control the world, and they're trying their best to hold on to their control, and they're losing it rapidly. You hear me? And so wherever these systems are implanted, there's a top-down system that is designed to shut people's eyes to the power that dwells within them. So the topic is holistic and organic systems for being a co-creator with God. Now, what do I mean by holistic and what do I mean by organic? I want to start with organic first. Organic systems are systems that develop in a natural way through human experience. And these organic systems are those that counter the systems that oppress us, the systems that are designed to lock our minds up and put them on a mental plantation, a psychological plantation, and to even get us to fear dealing with the spirit so that we won't even deal with that. But the mass of our people don't fall for that one. It's usually the most brainwashed intellectuals that fall for that one because spirit is so central to us. So when a system of mental oppression, for example, is laid down, you just can't go back to Kemet for the solution to that. You just can't go back to the Twa for a solution to that. You can't go back to the Dogon or the Yoruba or the Asante for the solution to that because these systems were free. They were created before any mind control systems came along. So organic systems are those, in this case, those that free the mind, that are natural processes that will take you through a process of liberation of the mind that leads to a freedom of the behind. And so they're organic. And so 4 of my 6 systems are organic. They come through experience. And the key to organic systems is they work. And so when you're facing the issue of mental slavery, for example, then there's a natural process for freeing yourself from it. Now, it'll also include going back to your African roots. But essentially, there are steps and stages you will go through to free that mind. And that's one of the sixfold, well, it's one of the 6 systems that I've developed, and it comes out of my own experience and the experience of others. You heard in the discussion on Amilcar Cabral, his experience of this. And Malcolm X did not know, that is, he could not, at the time of his birth, tell you the stages he went through. He was too close to him, but he could tell you the signs that indicated his transformation, which essentially was the shift of his philosophy and then many other things that happened. And I'll go into that next week. So organic systems are like systems that grow out of the ground, you know? But they're not weeds. They're actually systems. And when you cultivate them, inside of yourself, they will take you from one level to the other. And in the beginning, the only way you discover this is through going through this. So the movements of the 60s that were successful, largely the leadership of those movements went through this process. And even if they weren't successful, if they carried us forward, as Brother El Hajj Malik El Shabazz did, Brother Malcolm X, it was because he went through that process. In my case, that's been the key to my success in life. So organic, these are natural responses to oppression that we didn't have guidelines for coming from our past because we hadn't faced this before or on this level. And so it requires us to then delve into ourselves and discover that process of transformation. So this shows you that everything that we have doesn't just go back to our ancient past. Some of this is recreation of culture in our present that prepares us for the future. And so Garvey was undergoing that process that enabled him to create the largest mass movement in the 20th century in the Western Hemisphere, probably in the world, of African people, an anti-colonial movement. But Garvey didn't complete that process. And Garvey didn't consciously know it because we were in the process of discovering it. And so it's to the degree that he uncovered it, to that degree was his movement successful. So this show is entitled Wholistic and Organic Systems for Being a Co-Creator with God. You need these organic systems so that they unblock blockages that prevents you from exercising your full God-given powers of creativity. The Kemites didn't need that, not during the dynastic or the ancient period, because they were running their own show. And the same thing with the Twa and other ancient and traditional African civilizations. They need it now, though. Africans on the continent need this as much as we do Africans in Europe, in the Caribbean, Asia, the South Pacific, wherever we are. And I should say, this organic system for freeing the mind, for example, is the same one that will produce that freedom among people of color. Even though their oppression is slightly different, they undergo this same system of mental incarceration or mental colonization or mental slavery. Now, so that's organic, you know. And the key thing is it works. This is the key point to get. It works. For me, you know, I've said this before for new people that haven't heard it. I was undergoing review for chair of Black Studies. It was a number of years ago. Was in the late 80s. And Dr. Phil McGee was the dean, great dean. He was one of the innovators of the School of Black Psychology that Wade Nobles, Naeem Akbar, and brother formerly called Cedric X founded. And so his comment about me was, my stuff is field tested. Some of the field testing has been psychological. Some of the field testing has been on the battlefield. Because if some of you mistake what I'm saying as just dealing with the spirit, then you miss who I am. I'm an OR, original revolutionary. I'm about bringing about systemic change, not by myself. This is a collective process. And to transform a system of oppression, you need systems of liberation. And so some free the mind and help free the behind. Others free the society up. And so these organic systems are like that. The other is the holistic systems. Now, these organic systems are innovative. That means they're new. Innovation is the area of discovery in any field, in science and mathematics, in music, in athletics, um, in history, in politics, in social systems, family systems. It is the field of newness. In other words, innovative systems are new systems, and they represent 2% in any field, 2%. And it's been my honor that through practice, but especially I'm getting into the second through God, that I've been able to come up with these. And so I'm an innovator. And there are very few of us, but I'm a revolutionary. Among African-centered scholars, the major ones, I'm the only one. Now, there are some who are out there that may not as be well known that are also. And I would welcome the company. You know, I don't want to be the only one of anything. Of course, in the field of innovation, you're among the few. So that's organic innovation. You know, it grows naturally. These are natural systems. You know, but there's another realm of innovation, and that's holistic. This is the realm that comes from God. The distinction between organic innovation and holistic innovation is that organic innovation comes from experience. And it's those things that you do, that you test, that ends up working, that evolve into systems that have a sequence, system of natural growth. That is organic. And it's new and it's innovative. And most innovations come from this realm, particularly in the social sciences and stuff like that. It comes from people's experiences. Amilcar Cabral's innovations came from this realm, experience. And I made the point in the show preceding Ana Maria Cabral that the brilliance of Amilcar Cabral's thought, and I made the same point about Ella Baker, is that their brilliance comes from experience, the situations that they experienced in life that enabled them to draw certain conclusions. And those conclusions are put in the innovative realm because they represent something new. And so Cabral's conclusions on the social structure of Guinea-Bissau, that is how the ethnic groups were organized, it led to original conclusions. As I pointed out when I was covering Cabral, the white boys, the Marxists, or the so-called leftist, so-called revolutionary white thinkers will dismiss his thought and say it's not original. It's not original. Well, what they mean is it is not laid out A to Z the way white people like to do their stuff, scripted A to Z. You hear me? It arises from situations. And so the situation of studying how Africans organized themselves throughout Guinea-Bissau, coming out of traditional structures and then influenced by colonialism, Cabral was able to come up with the best social structure analysis of anyone in the 20th century. Now, W.B. Du Bois did a great social structure analysis in Philadelphia Negro. There's another one on Black Metropolis by Caton and St. Clair Drake. It's also brilliant social structure. And then there's one on the Black establishment that I've referred to before by Lerone Bennett. See, I give credit where credit's due. And this is the best analysis of the control group called the Black establishment that's used to control you and me. But we run around here talking about the boule, something simple. You know what I mean? Some fraternal organization. Just like some of us want to reduce white social structure, white political and economic structure to their secret society organizations, when it is far more complex than this, you know? So Cabral was giving you a situational analysis of how tribes and ethnic groups and families structures were organized in Guinea-Bissau. And it was so accurate that he could organize a liberation movement on it. So that is a case of organic thought that works, because it came out of a situation that he mastered. See, the white boy, what he likes to do often is come up with a theory that he hasn't practiced, and then lay that out as a revolutionary theory, and then tell you you can't have a revolutionary movement without this, but he ain't tested it. And because he's come out of a despiritualized society, he doesn't know that the key to anything working is that you've got to be whatever it is that you know. And as I pointed out before, my adage is to know the truth is to be the truth. That is the African approach and the new African approach. And so Cabral embodied what he learned at another stage. I'll go through that next week. But you've got to practice it. That's the only way something is field tested. If it's inside of you, you've got to internalize it. If it's outside of you, you've got to know it. Y'all get this? This is how African stuff works. But that's because in the end, spirit is at its foundation. Cabral had drawn the conclusion that for the people who would inherit power in Guinea-Bissau to work for the people and not become an elite that stepped on them and treated them like nothing, as African leadership on the continent does today, and only a few before them haven't under the so-called independent but neo-colonial model. If you're going to free yourself from that, then he said it's a moral question. He's right. It's a question of ma'at. Ma'at is ethical. But ma'at is more than ethical. Ma'at is spirit-based. I don't like using the word spiritual because that's, again, a theoretical term. There's no word for spiritual in any African language, but there's a word for spirit. You have to have the spirit of truth. You have to have the spirit of love of your people. And if you do, you won't step on them. And if you do, you'll respect them and you'll listen to them and you'll learn from them. You know? So Cabral had that spirit. Unfortunately, those that came after him didn't, or at least the ones who seized leadership. I didn't discuss that then. I don't have the time to discuss it now. So when we're looking at systems, that's an organic system. And Cabral is best leader for a lot of reasons in the world, one of which is his analysis of his social structure was the best in the world. And social structure is everything. Because when it comes to earth structures, everything flows from your family structure. Y'all get that? And by the way, Marx missed that. How are you going to have a revolutionary system and you haven't critiqued the family system that was at the root of what you define as the problem, capitalism? Or for that matter, the family system that was at the root of nomadism, which is Aryanism. The same old system, it's just come into a more devilish form in this vulturistic capitalist system that makes a few rich and everybody else in the mud, poor. So organic, holistic systems are those systems that come from God and come through human beings. Holistic systems, by definition, I would say in the area of science, they are the systems that come from God's mind that scientists who pipe into God's mind think, that enables them to uncover laws of the universe, laws of the cosmos. There are multiple laws of the cosmos, most of which scientists do not know. Only a few have been discovered. And those have all been discovered through piping into God's mind, or what in the West is called through the intuitive method. So Einstein's theory of relativity came from a dream. It came because dreams, when they're accurate, come from God. Or the theory of the organic table in chemistry came again from a dream. It came from God. The person who came up with that had piped into God's thoughts. That's what George Washington Carver was doing all the time. He knew it. He said, I was thinking God's thoughts. He called going into the library as creative science, where without anybody present, he could pipe into God's thoughts and come up with new science. Greatest scientists in the 20th century and probably the 21st. So when you pipe into God's mind, and that's my experience because I've had that experience, so I call it piping into God's mind. George Washington Carver called it thinking God's thoughts. He had multiple experiences. I've only had two. And as my sister, who's a spirit person herself, says, if you want to get these answers, you've got to ask the question. And the big answers come from big questions. And I don't know why God gives it only to a few, but I do know this. Those who have received these innovations have had good hearts, because God is assuming that what is received will be used for the upliftment of humanity, not for profit or gain, not for oppression. So the topic today, holistic and organic systems for being a co-creator with God. The highest realm of creativity that humans can have is the holistic realm. Because when you pipe into God's mind, you are piping in to a whole mind, God's mind. But you're not going to get all of what's in God's mind. Einstein tried to. That was foolishness. He couldn't, even if God gave it to him, he wouldn't know what he had. It's too vast for the human being to comprehend. And God doesn't work that way when God shares stuff with people. I'll repeat what I said about George Washington Carver. When he first started piping into God's mind, he asked God huge, huge questions. And God said, that's too big. Each time God would say, that's too big. Until he finally said, well, what about the peanut? And then God said to him, I can help you with that. And you'll see why that's so important. But he wasn't just the peanut man. He innovated in so many different levels, but at the highest realm, God's realm. That's powerful. And when you have a planet out of balance, not just people who are unfree and oppressed, but the planet that has now gone beyond global warming, according to the head of the United Nations, to global boiling. You've got oceans now 100 degrees heat, 100 degrees. And the corporate managers don't care. They're just so happy to see the ice melt in Alaska so that they can go down there and dig for the oil and pollute the water. The only fish I eat is sake salmon that comes from the Alaska headwaters because it hasn't been poisoned yet. It's the only fish I'll eat. It's the only fish you should eat. But how much longer will that be true? You know? So when you pipe in to God's holistic mind, you come up with holistic solutions. You come up with them in that they come from God through you, but then it's your task to apply them to the problems facing humanity and Mother Earth now. Now, the innovative systems are empowering systems for both personal empowerment and collective empowerment. A lot of people think that innovation is just for, in this case, becoming a co-creator is just about the person and empowering the person. No. The person and the group are inseparable. In previous shows, I was dealing with the choices we make in heaven. African spirit systems understand this in great detail. Where in the presence of God, we pick our destiny on earth. We pick our time to be born. We pick the parents that will give birth to us. We lay out a general plan for what we want to do on earth. We lay out our strengths and weaknesses. We lay out our trials. That all happens before we leave heaven. This is confirmed by millions of experiences of people who have died and been reborn. That is, they've been operated on, their heartbeat went, their breathing went, and they went to this higher realm. They all said they saw this, but this is what the Yorubas teach. They call this Ori, your destiny. They call it your Ka in Kemet, your destiny. Each African system has a term for the same thing because we're the first people. So we go back to origin. So everything about you is about purpose, whether you realize it or not. And it is about the compacts you have made and whether or not you will align with it. You may not remember being in heaven. A few do. Most don't. I certainly didn't. But if you go to your gifts, you go to your loves, if you go to your deepest wishes, those things that are most important to you, they're identifying that compact. They're identifying that purpose. They're identifying the essence of why you're here. So the innovative systems are empowering systems for personal and collective empowerment. They're designed to raise your creativity to its highest level so that you are in the best position to produce personal change in your life for the better and in the best position to change society in groups, because this is not going to happen by yourself, for the better. And spirits in heaven descend from the heaven plane to the earth plane in groups. We call them generations here, you know, with slightly different assignments, but complementing what each other is doing. And this is also a part of the God power that they bring to earth. But they're here to undergo trials and tribulations to test their power. to raise their power. Because in the heavenly plane, you're being prepared, except for the highest heaven, but you're being prepared to be tested here. And so spirits in heaven, you who are alive now, they're watching you. And every time you overcome something, they have joy. And every time you're facing something and it's hard, they have sorrow. But they're on your side. They're trying to help you. That's your mother who's gone, your grandmother that's gone, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles and friends, but they're friends in heaven, some of whom have no blood relationship to you on earth. And then there are great spirits that never came to earth, who are your assistants in life to help you. And so in heaven, you prepared for this journey. And it's a question of what you do with this preparation. So the innovative systems empower you personally and collectively to raise your consciousness and creativity, which is your power, both personally and as a group. So these are revolutionary, spiritual, political, social, economic systems that only work when we live them. And so in the course of life, as we discover those things that will help to empower us, it is the living of those truths that empower us, and passing those down to those who come after us empowers them as well. So the topic for this show, Holistic and Organic Systems for Being a Co-Creator with God, is really about what does it mean to be human? Put another way, this show is really about why am I here? Why are you here? What is my essential purpose for being, for living? That's what all of this is about. And let me tell you this, when you're able to pipe into that, then you are into your purpose. Then you are into the most important reason for you being here. And everything else beyond that is easy. You hear me? I don't care what kind of trials and tribulations you're going through. When you're on your mission, then you're on a special journey of a lifetime that you picked, and you're in the process of creating it on this earth plane, manifesting it on this earth plane. That is really the joy of this. Ultimately, the ultimate thing about being a co-creator is being a creator of yourself. This is the key thing. A creator of yourself. So this deals with what is your essence? What does it mean truly to be a human being? Again, this question, the answer to this question is inseparable from the answer to the question of what does it mean to be God? What does it mean to be human has got the same answer as what it means to be God. You hear what I'm saying? And by the way, this is a human question. This is especially for us, for African people. But this is a question for all humanity. So I'm not here attempting, because I don't have the capacity, and no human does, to answer the question of what is the totality of the meaning of God? No, I don't know that. You don't know that. The Bombara, when they're initiating the youth into manhood and womanhood and then into the higher orders of mastery, and they ask the question, what is God? Their ultimate answer is Dombali, Dombali, unknowable. So in the essence of God, in terms of all of what God is, unknowable, beyond our comprehension. I'm not asking that question. I'm practical. I know I can't get it. Einstein was searching for the unified theory of everything, you know. He understood something about higher mind. He just didn't get it. If you could get it, oh, what a terrible thing that would be. Because if you could get it, what would you do with it in the state of the world today? It would be used to mess stuff up, but you couldn't get it. It's too vast. It's beyond our comprehension. So I'm just asking the question of what is the essential meaning of God? Meaning, what is God's central purpose? Of all the purposes, what is that which is most important? And I think that one's not hard to come up with. God's essential purpose is as creator. God is creator. Now, in previous show, I discussed about 3-4 weeks ago, I discussed the difference between the Kemetic idea of origin or creation and the European, showing that Septepi was the Kemetic concept of first occasion, the watery noon, which is itself electromagnetic energy out of which God comes. This is their concept of first occasion. And we certainly know that the mass of Earth is over 75% water. This is consistent with our knowledge of geology and of science. But this is their idea, Septepi. But they would always go back to first occasion. But for the Aryan, for the European, as I pointed out, is teleological, utility-oriented, and likes to reduce things to mechanics and a machine orientation. They said the first occasion came about through evolution. And they had, at different times in their history, some slight refinements on evolution, but it's essentially mechanical, and God's out of the picture. This whole magnificent cosmos just came into being. Huh. Even if you're mechanical, you know, I drive a Corvette, so you're going to tell me the Corvette just came into being? Somebody put it together. It wasn't somebody that put this cosmos together, but it was some force that did this, because this cosmos is too interconnected for just to be happenstance or accident. So someone asked me again after the show, well, why is it that the European or the Aryan comes up with evolution, we come up with Septepi? Well, a despiritualized people, you know, who have left spirit out of the equation, though at one time they had some concept of spirit, are going to come up with a mechanical idea of things. And as people who understand the essence of God as spirit are going to have a spirit understanding of things, but it's going to have solid science behind it. That is astrophysics. So the Dogon, who are the master astrophysicists of Africa, even greater than Kemet, and Kemet produced great master astrophysicists. Dr. Finch draws that conclusion, and I do as well. The Dogon even exceed their knowledge, or at least for what we know. But they were both master astrophysicists. For them, the first occasion is the occasion where Ama, God, created the cosmos. And God created multiple cosmoses. because astrophysicists now know that there are many universes, not just one. Dogon astrophysicists knew this. So God created, according to the Dogon, and God is called Ama, God created this cosmos through thought. Uh-oh. Thought. Uh-oh. Really? I can hear y'all saying it. Really? You know what I mean? Huh? God thinks. Well, yeah, I hope so. If God's creator, you know, how you think he did? Just got a mud pie and made it? You know? No. God did it through thought. And according to the Dogon, God did it through a thought process called Adunoso. I've covered this before. Adunoso. Adunoso. Literally, Adunoso is table of signs drawn on the ground because the Dogon didn't write except in picture writing. It's writing, but it's not the kind that's on paper. What does this mean? So means spoken word. Aduno means universe. So Adunoso, spoken words of the universe. They're saying God created the universe through thought, manifested through God's spoken words that are Adunoso, that give birth to not only the universe, but to multiple universes. This comes from the Dogon Sodaya system, Sodayyi, clear word system, which is their fourth degree, their highest degree of knowledge, which their master astrophysicists who are Hogans or priest master. So their highest level of thought reveals that the entire cosmos and many more are materializations of God's thoughts. So think about that. So when an African looks at the sky, and that's a new African, if you're an African American, you're really grounded. You don't have to know Dogon thought. When you look at the sky, that you're looking at God. When you're looking at the stars, you're looking at God. When you're looking at a plant, you're looking at God. All of this is God. And this is also why we maintained a balance, because we would not go and attack God, which is also us, because this same force that is above is below inside of us. So this is the Dogon conception that the universe is created through God's thought. God's power is the power of creation, and that power of creation comes through God's thoughts, expressed through God's words. Now, the Bambara describe God's thoughts as the totality of thought. So when as humans, we pipe into God's mind because our minds are incapable of knowing everything that God knows. We are piping into a whole of a part. So what does this mean? Every part of the universe is interconnected. And so when God creates a part of the creation of the cosmos, the parts, the stars, the planets, the dwarf stars out of which everything occurs, in these parts is the whole. And so among the Dogon, they say what what modern astrophysicists say, that the vastness of the cosmos comes from the infinitely small, which is a dwarf star. They identify that as Sirius B. And it is the explosion of this dwarf star that gives birth to the entire cosmos. Now, we know that's how the cosmos came into being. The Dogon call it the Big Burst. Astrophysicists in the West call it the Big Bang. But from the infinitely small comes the infinitely large. In Dogon philosophy, when you go through the first 3 degrees, Juriso, Beniso, and Boloso, forward knowledge, Juriso, Beniso, sideward knowledge, and Boloso, knowledge from behind, the backward, W-O-R-D. This knowledge is knowledge conveyed through simple instruction. And so in the Dogon lower system, Digitaria exilis, which is the smallest of cereal grains, contains within it all the elements of the cosmos. But in the 3 degrees of knowledge, you don't know that Digitaria exilis symbolizes or is a dunoso of, or the spoken word of, the dwarf star Sirius B. You don't know that. Because in the first 3 degrees of knowledge, they don't cover much in terms of cosmic knowledge, but they give you the laws of the cosmos. You have a question here from Lao Tzu. Are the Dogon and many of us guilty of anthropomorphism in regards to the Creator? We think it is. Is it possible that the Creator has no thoughts or feelings? No, the Dogon have no such idea because they've investigated this realm. They've been to this realm. See, for us, it's just an idea. It's an abstraction. But I'm always comparing the conceptions of God that Africans have with what we know from the spirit systems, the modern spirit systems, parapsychology. People who have gone to the other side and viewed things, who've died and come back, or people who have paranormal powers and who see things. And then you compare that with what we generally know about this realm. And what's interesting is parapsychology, Dogon, Kemetic, Yoruba, Asante, Chwa thought, and others, and that includes New African thought, Caribbean, whatever, they're all the same. They'll just give you a different dimension of this truth. So God, and what is spirit? Spirit is thought, baby. And everything God creates has spirit in it, and it's got wisdom in it. It's just that you have a special place in this order of creation, second only to God and the higher spirits that work with God, some of whom were human and some never were. So God, I've seen God. I've seen God. God is the ultimate expression of unconditional love. Now, you want to talk about expression of feeling? There is no higher expression. And we come to this earth to try and get some of it. I'll be 84 next Friday, August the 4th. I married when I was about 66 or whatever. Why did I marry? I mean, I've been married 33 years before. I'm a person that loves myself. I have a sense of purpose. My best friend is me. Why did I marry? I wanted to experience real love from another. I had love from a mother, from a father, from a sister, from a brother, from friends, from myself, from God. But I wanted to experience this love here on earth. You hear me? Well, all we're experiencing is a small little speck of what God's given us, unconditional love. That is hard, unconditional love. Accept yourself the way you are and then work on it. That's unconditional. Accept other people the way they are and let them work on it. But don't get in the way. Accept them for who they are. As we have a saying, African American saying is, every tub has its own bottom. I heard this first from my first wife. It came from her father, but that's an old African American folk saying. Because in her family, one of her brothers was a gambler. And this was in the bayou in Louisiana. Well, those are some of the most African people you got outside of South Carolina and Georgia, a few other places. And so he had women stacked all over the place, like, you have cards in a game. And so the ladies in the house who were good Christians were hard on him. But her father, Anassa, who was my first wife, whose name that came from Louisiana was Charles Cena. Charles Cena. That is, again, an African name where you take the masculine and feminize it. That's a whole nother feature of our culture. And she kept that name when she took Anassa. Well, her father talked about his brother who was a gambler, and he said every tub has its own bottom, meaning he's a gambler. What do you expect? Don't judge him. That's unconditional love. How many of us have that? God is the ultimate in feeling. But that's a good question that brother's asking, because we get this idea the highest order is objectivity. Detach yourself from that. God's not detached. God's in you. Huh? Oh, yeah. So what I've explained before, one of the insights I've gained from the Dogon is that in the smallest of things in Dogon philosophy is contained everything, in the smallest of things. And they are teaching you something because they have constructed a philosophy that resembles the cosmos, because the cosmos is basically made up of the same elements. And so every part of the cosmos contains every other part. And so their systems of philosophy, of deep thought, are whole. They are holistic because they are reflecting God's being, in this case, God's thoughts, which give birth to everything that is. So we are a manifestation of that. So to know, why is it that it's important that we know God? What is the essence of God? What does it mean to be God? To know the essence of God is to know the essence of being a human being. And as humans, we're a miniature reflection of this whole. Just as every part of the cosmos is a smaller part of the larger part, so are we. We are that miniature reflection. And so astrophysics tells us, and the Dogon knew this, the Kemites knew this. My book on Seba is basically based on this, at least one part of it, that is the system of learning we know, and I've said this before, but I want to give you the breakdown, the chemical breakdown that proves this. We as human beings are miniature reflections of this larger cosmos. We are miniature stars. We are stellar dust. Astrophysicists will tell you that the composition of the human being is the composition of the stars. And what is it? We're made up of 65% oxygen, 18.5% carbon, 9.5% hydrogen, 3.2% nitrogen, 1.5% calcium, 1% phosphorus, 0.4% potassium. You know you need some potassium. 0.3% sulfur, because potassium aids you in thinking. We go back to, does God think? Oh, on an air or level that we can't even conceive. 0.2% chlorine, 0.1% magnesium. By the way, if you're doing good nutrition, these are things that you should supplement in your diet. You should take nutritional supplements that bring this in. But we're miniature stars. We're stardust. But I'm going to say this. While we're miniature stars, we're more than the stars in that of all of God's creations, we're the only ones that God created to communicate directly with us. So he have a companion. And we're the only ones that can mess the cosmos up or raise it to its highest order. And God knew that when these compacts were being made in heaven, he knew that when we came to earth, we had this power to choose, free will. Is God just inanimate? Does God lack feeling? He's got to have, not he, it has to have the highest level of feeling to tolerate this. Because it's like a great painter who makes this great painting and then allows his students to come in and participate in the painting. Why does God do that? Because all the great seers, mystics, holy men and women all say this, and it makes perfect sense, that when God created the cosmos, because God is within all of us, we are created out of God just as the cosmos is. We were there with God before creation and at creation. We were co-creators, every one of us. God was doing the big thing, but we were doing our part. When you understand that, you are understanding what you are. And it's no ego thing, because we're God little g. The one is a God big G. You hear me? But we are of the same substance, the same stuff. We just don't have as much. And note that at this time of creation that astrophysicists say is about 4.5 billion years ago, we were there as co-creators. Because if God is within you, then it means you are with God. How much we choose to follow God's path is our choice. And those are the choices we make on earth. And remember, in Medu Neter, they have a saying. When human beings chose to do wrong, God says, I didn't make that choice. Humans did. Every good parent knows there's a point where the child grows up and you tried to teach them to know and respect and love themselves, and then they're on their own. And You can't be around there telling them what to do all the time. Well, the compact made in heaven is clear. You're on your own now. Call on God when you really need help. But you are here to be a co-creator. And a co-creator means having the confidence to grow inside yourself and come up with something new. The great seers, the great prophets, the great holy men and women say that what God gets out of this is what we come up with that hasn't been come up with before, that is by humans. When we add our spin to it, it's like good music. When you're learning, you sound like other masters. But when you reach the point of mastery, you have your own sound. And that's what God wants to hear. That's also why God's a lover of music. As Fool Crows, the great holy man of the Lakota people, said, God's a sucker for music. Why? Because, and this will be in the second part of the series, music is the closest thing to God's essence, which is another component of the essence of creativity. So how does this tie into a human being? So we are co-creators. Where does our power tie in? I've already covered this. If you notice the show that I did on the law of attraction, the law of attraction is as you think, so you are. A lot of what we experience in life is a manifestation of our thoughts or the thoughts of others. And those thoughts enable us to create reality. So the reality is that thoughts are the basis for matter. Just as in the Dogon system of Unconditional, God's thoughts precede matter. And in fact, all African systems teach this, that it is the spirit behind a thing that is eternal. It is the thing itself that is perishable, that is here, but will die physically. But it is that force, that idea, that thought that gives rise to the thing that is eternal or is more real than the thing that is created. So be careful about what you think, because think it long enough, work it in your mind long enough, you will manifest it into reality. And of course, your enemies do the same thing. So it doesn't just mean that because you think of something, it's going to come into being. No, it's a lot of hard work. And there's going to be forces out there to obstruct you. And so you have to have the deep belief in yourself that you can bring about these changes. So just as God's thoughts give rise to multiple cosmoses, we as human beings, our thoughts give rise to the realities we create. We created the reality of Kemet, Yoruba, Asante, Dogon civilization. We have created a great culture, the culture of popular choice of the world, new African culture, as Africans have and other people have throughout the world. Why? Because we went inside ourselves and we gave rise to this through our thoughts, through our words, and through our actions. So our essential nature as human beings is co-creators. When you are assuming this role, you are doing the most important work of your life. I can say from my own experience, I know if you had Coltrane on here, he could tell you from his that creation, creating something beautiful that will uplift humanity. For Coltrane, a sound that inspires people. For George Washington Carver, in botany, inventions improving the lives of plants or other inventions. Whatever your area is, when you're engaged in that, you're engaged in your most important love, your purpose for being. It is the greatest joy you'll experience in your life. It is comparable to the seed of a father and the nurturing and the caring of the embryo that comes into being as a life form. It is comparable to the birth of life because it is a new form of life. It is taking the planet, humanity, human beings, organic and inorganic things to a better level. And it is through the joy of doing on a small scale what God does on the vast scale, creating. That's what we're here for. That's our purpose. We are all God's in that the force of God, in this case, the force of creation, is within all of us. And as the managers of this cosmos, we have the delicate responsibility to do our best to maintain universal harmony at a time of great disharmony, where the forces of destruction and disruption are making this planet uninhabitable, making lives for human beings miserable, condemning the creatures of the oceans, the walking creatures, the inanimate creatures of the land live in misery, when we have the responsibility of being custodians. So we have to draw from these powers to create what in Black folk culture we call something that's mo better. We've been doing that. We got to take it to higher and higher levels. And that's by each one of you going inside yourself. And I know some of you are at different stages of doing this, of cultivating your voice, your adunaso, your spoken word of the universe. So that when God hears your music, whatever area it is, science, literally music, economics, politics, in your family, in the raising of your children, whatever it is, it will put a smile on God's essence. And as God must do when God hears that wailing sound of the spiritual blues, God has to say, counselors, listen. And that's what we have to do. That's what we've been doing. We got to take it to higher levels. So if we can, move to the level of organic or holistic creation. But whether we do or not, create to the best of your capacity. so that we can draw holistically and organically systems that enhance our powers as co-creators. And since the new African is by essence, by ethos, creative, all humans have the creative drive. But when your ethos is creative, then it's the very key to your survival. And when we're able to clear out the mess that clouds us, the mess of self-doubt, the mess of imitating others, the mess of the fear of going into new realms and coming up with the new, for the fear that we may be criticized for it. When we are locked up in the fear of expressing our true dreams and our true nature, then we're blocking ourselves. So we have to unblock ourselves so that we can be the best co-creators possible. Hotep. Let's see if they got any comments here. Chris Dyke may grow closer to the light for helping many souls understand life. Yes, that'll be a central topic of next week's show, which will focus heavily on the light. This was implied in this one. Solutions. Does the Ba and the Ba-Chwa correlate with the Ba soul of ancient Kemet? Well, remember that the Ba-Chwa, the Chwa, the Kun, the San, they come before Kemet. What Kemet is, what ancient Africa was, which is recent compared to the Chwa, they go back 149,000 years. Kemet goes back at its most ancient period, 10,000 BC. You're dealing with source. So the Ba-Chwa, the Chwa, the Kun, the San people call themselves the pure people. The Kemites did not. They could not, because they were not at that level of God purity. The Chwa, who were the world's first people, the Kun specifically were. And they are the first innovators on the planet, including innovating Kemet. They are the Anu that gave birth to Kemet. Read my book, The Integration Trap, Generation Gap, Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures. You can order that on Gumroad. It explains that. M. Jewell, and the church says, blame it on the devil to remove blame of self. Negative deeds are a personal choice, not due to an outside force. No African system has a devil in it. That's Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. They bring the devil in. Now, of course, in enslavement, we rightfully call the slave masters devils. I think they were worse than anything that had a tail and a pitchfork. You think God created something so evil that the only thing greater than that is God? Hell no. First of all, there's nothing on earth that's all good or all bad. It's a combination of both, with it inclining more towards the positive than the negative, and the higher we get, more positive than negative. And there is a realm of the pits, of the heat, that the Christians, Muslims, and Judaic people call hell. There is that realm. God's over it. It's the other side of heaven. When some of these suckers think they're going there and end up in the hot spot, God's over that. which means those negative spirits stay there until they've learned their lesson. You hear me? Yeah, brother Agula, you got it. We're miniature stars, brother. And in fact, you'll see that the seventh book that I'm finishing, it's all about, if you're going to teach a child, bring out what's in. Don't be imposing your stuff on them. Bring out the light, Yeah. You're all powers. You're just being put under, as the people of Jamaica call it, heavy manners. The heavy manners of this Aryan who's been able to use gunpowder and every other kind of power to keep you down. But the lessons of the 20th century and of the 21st century will be that those powers that put them in power, now the world has them. And they're putting these powers in check so you can exercise your real powers. And in fact, it's through the exercise of your real powers that you'll put these powers in check. ABK, God thought the universe into being, so we live in God's memory. Yeah, but in God's thoughts is God, meaning if the stars are creations of God's thought, God is those stars. God is in those stars. If we are creations of God's thought, God is in us. And we know that, and we'll go into another level of that later on. And this is no ego thing. And in fact, when you experience thinking God's thoughts, it's a very humbling experience. It's also a very beautiful experience. You're just a conduit through which this truth comes. You're able to then say you see something that hasn't been seen before, but it came through piping into God's mind. That's humbling. You'll add something. Hopefully it's right. And so you can put a stamp on it. But all innovations on this higher plane that discover the truths of history, the truths of science, of mathematics, whatever, are discoveries of truths already there. That's why they say there's nothing new under the sun. Except for human beings, it's new because it was never seen before. Sim Kerheb is asking people to join his ancestral knowledge group. Right on. I see Lao Tzu responded to this one from M. Jewel about Dr. D. Oyibo. I'm not familiar with him, but he responded. He said he hasn't seen any verification of his thoughts. And Lao Tzu has a science background. Question for Dr. Obadashaka Show. How do we duplicate the process that George Washington Carver used to think the Creator's thoughts? Good question. One, you have to master the field in which you're in. So in his field, botany, and a number of other things, because he had to know some chemistry, some physics, other things, but botany was his field. But also music was, painting was, singing was. He was an artist. That's what a good creator is as well. And God is the greatest artist of all. Look at the beauty God has created that is being spoiled now. So the first thing to pipe into God's thoughts, because I've done this, but not on his level, you have to master your area. You have to know it inside out. But when you do that, you will simply be a master of the field of knowledge, but you're not a master in the sense that you have anything original that you've contributed. You might have something slightly original. In music, for example, if you came under the school of bebop founded by Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, and Thelonious Monk, and so you can play bebop. Well, if you make a contribution, you may be able to add something new to the sound. That's called an improviser, but it's within an existing field. But when you pipe into God's mind, then you're able to come up with a new school. So you have to master a field and then raise questions that take you to a new level. And if God gives you the answer, then you have then got the capacity to come up with, in the case of John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. That sound came to him from God in a dream. But he could only reproduce it after years of practice because he was an ordinary average musician, and then apprenticing under Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk. And it was only then, and he only did it in his 30s. That's late for a jazz improviser to become an innovator. And then innovated 3 more fields, not all of them coming from God. He also had a natural ability to pipe into God. So he was always having dreams, and he was intuitive. And then he also had good character. And this is key, though not all of our innovators always fulfill this requirement. Because of the interruption of slavery or colonialism, they may also have some negative qualities that kind of work against their creativity and also limit their ability to communicate with God. Because George Washington Carver was such a humble human being, he had a steady stream. My access to thinking God's thoughts or in piping into God's mind came after a lot of purification work. 3 months a year for 5 years, 15 months of working on myself. And then a lot of work that I'd been doing throughout my life, transforming my philosophy, thought, and behavior pattern. So that's what enabled me to pipe into that, though I had had a previous experience of thinking God's thoughts that came before that, but it was a part of this same transformational process. And so I think a part of that is being the truth that you're learning. This is key. But then it's God's choice. Will God share these answers with you? You know? Brother Ugula, thank you. That's real good teaching. Thank you, brother. Michael Maryberry, beautiful. That's what we try and do, is present beauty. Because if it's got any connection to God or us trying to be more godlike, it's got to be beautiful. Chad Jomo Kenyatta is talking about the granting of land in Oklahoma. There was a whole movement around that, blacks moving from the South. to Oklahoma after Reconstruction, post-Reconstruction. Lao Tzu is talking about getting some non-toxic insect repellents. Yeah, I hear you. See, we got anything new down here? Okay, that would appear. Okay. Ubuntu. Greetings, Dr. Obertashaka. What a great show. I'm trying to understand Dr. Fu Kaiua. He said that we are part of the wheel of other community sons. What exactly are the community sons? I'm familiar with his work, and he comes out of African communal tradition, and he's got some great things that he has tried to reproduce through his thought around collective decision making. I haven't read his thing on community sons, so I'd have to read it before I could make any comment. But his work is very good. So Lao Tzu is asking a question: how do I enlist the creator to help to design systems that would utilize the abundance of heat energy created by man-made climate change? That's a good question. And you have a scientific orientation, so keep working on it. And you'll probably come up with some answers. Sister Lisa, you want a reading from my sister, click in. You'll see there's a site underneath the show where you click in and you'll find her address. Click into her and contact her. She'll love to do your chart. Yeah, Ogawa suggested the same thing. Solutions. I could imagine that the Anu communicated on higher planes and dimensional levels. You better believe it. And that's why they could create a civilization that lasted for over 100,000 years in peace and in plenty, with no slavery or oppression, full freedom. And it's completely left out of the historical discourse, not only by us, but whites as well, by black, as whites as well. Can someone type the website into this chat? Which website are you asking for? Are you asking for this website or my sister's website? If it's my sister's, when you click in, when you come into the show, after this clicks out, you'll see her name, Sandrea Bradley. Click into that. And then this website, you're clicked into Dr. Obitashaka's show. So that gives you this website. And if you want to order books, you can also through this website. So that's it. Hotep, part 2 of this next week. And the following week, a conversation with Brother Davey D on the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Hotep. Thank you too.